purpose of my study has been to answer the question, what would we do without coral? Corals, or Anthozoa, are invertebrates. However, one coral is made up of thousands of polyps. Polyps are tiny, soft-bodied organisms that come from the Cnidarian family and are closely related to jellyfish and sea anemones. Polyps consist of a soft, sac-like body and a mouth covered in stinging tentacles. They can range from the size of a pinhead to a bit larger than a basketball. Coral begins when a single polyp attaches itself to a rock or piece of shell on the sea floor. The polyp, being an asexual animal, then multiplies and multiplies to create a colony. This colony acts as one organism. Corals extract calcium carbonate from the water, molecule by molecule, and use it to secrete their limestone skeletons, also known as calicles. A coral's stinging tentacles help it catch small prey and fish excrement for nourishment, but their main source of food comes from their own personal factories. Similar to most plants, corals get their main source of food through photosynthesis. Polyps have algae, or zooxanthellae, inside of them, which photosynthesize as well as give corals their vibrant hues. Coral reefs are formed when many coral colonies connect over hundreds of years of growth. Red algae act like pink glue in reef formation, cementing bits of shell and rock. There can be any number of different coral species in one reef, which is partly what makes reefs such diverse and rich habitats. For example, Australia's Great Barrier Reef holds over 400 species of coral, as well as a third of all soft corals. The magnificent reef began growing about 20,000 years ago, and is now the largest living structure on Earth, spanning over 2,000 kilometers. Coral reefs, though they cover less than 1% of our oceans, are home to a quarter of all marine life. Coral reefs, like tree rings and glacier cores, provide information on past ocean conditions. As they grow, their limestone skeletons form layers which vary in thickness and length depending on ocean conditions. Corals have been around for at least 500 million years, millions of years before dinosaurs roamed the Earth. Some coral reefs grow for thousands or even millions of years, so scientists can study their layers and find out what the Earth's climate might have been like in the ancient past. Corals are fascinating, intelligent, and vital animals, but they are now dying at an unprecedented rate. The excessive burning of fossil fuels, as well as deforestation, pollution, and much more, has caused our planet's delicate atmosphere to fill with heat-trapping gases. Our ocean has absorbed 90% of the extra heat trapped inside our atmosphere, and if it hadn't, the average temperature on land would be over 50 degrees Celsius. The ocean may seem vast, powerful, and invincible, but we have learned that nothing is invincible in the face of climate change. Our oceans have warmed an average of 2 degrees Celsius. We're already seeing the side effects that 2 degrees of warming have had. We've seen massive tropical storms, unparalleled glacier melt, and the disappearance or displacement of countless marine species, just to name a few. Not to mention the effects this rise in temperature has had on coral. Coral house algae, which produce their main source of food through photosynthesis. However, when water temperatures rise, these algae can't photosynthesize. The coral realizes that something inside it is not doing what it's supposed to, so naturally it expels the algae, therefore taking away its main source of food. And if water temperatures don't drop, the coral starves to death. This fatal process is called bleaching. Corals are naturally translucent, but the same zooxanthellae that provide their food give them their vibrant colors. When corals undergo bleaching and lose this algae, they become white. 2014 to 2017 marked the third mass global bleaching event, and quickly became the longest, most widespread event in recorded history. An estimated half of the Great Barrier Reef's coral bleached and died during this event, and reefs all around the world were hit hard, with 70% experiencing prolonged high temperatures causing bleaching. In the last 30 years, we've lost 50% of the world's corals, covering an estimated 4,633 square miles. As the temperature of our oceans continues to rise, the water becomes more acidic, making it harder for coral reefs to grow, and weakening their limestone skeletons. If corals can't grow, reefs that have bleached and died won't be able to replenish themselves, and before we know it, all of our magnificent reefs could be gone. The purpose of my study was to answer the question, what would our world look like without coral? Fast forward to 2070. Climate change is hitting our world hard, with monster storms tearing up cities, sea level rise drowning coastlines and islands, and creating thousands of climate refugees. Arid soil and little to no fresh water fail to produce enough food for our massive population, sparking a humanitarian crisis. Heat waves and heat-induced illnesses kill thousands, while air pollution and starvation kills still more. This doesn't sound like a nice world to live in. And I haven't even mentioned the effects that the loss of coral have had on our planet. Coral reefs are the foundation of the marine food chain. They provide rich habitats for 25% of all marine species, especially to protect young fish as they grow. Coral reefs and their inhabitants depend on each other. The corals themselves provide the foundation of the ecosystem, as well as food, water purification, a fish nursery, and shelter. Plankton provide nutrition while small fish do the same, as well as provide cleaning services to larger fish. You can't have this diverse, submerged city without fish, and you definitely can't have it without the coral. In 2050, 90% of the world's coral reefs were dead, and by 2070, they've been completely wiped out. Thousands of species have been displaced and have had to find new homes. Many reef dwellers have gone extinct due to lack of food and protection from predators. Types of fish, called corallivorous, eat nothing but coral tissue. Corallivorous fish, like the chevron butterfly fish, have lost their only source of food. With the extinction of these smaller fish, it's harder and harder for larger vertebrates to find food, as well as many birds and other mammals. The disappearance of coral reefs has caused the underwater food chain to begin collapsing. It's the beginning of the end for our oceans. Coral reefs provided a safe haven for young fish to grow, full of nutrients and shelter. Without this nursery, infant vertebrates either grow up too weak to survive very long, or are killed by larger predators before they get the chance to grow up. This causes more and more species to face extinction. Pollution and acidity in the water worsens now that the corals aren't there to clean it, causing countless fatalities. The life cycle of millions of species has been interrupted because even though a quarter of all marine life live on reefs, over a third spend at least a portion of their lives there. Our oceans, which were once magical wonderlands, are now polluted and empty. The disappearance of so many species has greatly affected over 1 billion people, especially in developing countries, who rely on reef fish as their main source of food, sparking a humanitarian crisis. People who aren't affected by this food shortage have probably had to abandon their homes or have drowned in massive coastal erosion and huge tsunamis. Coral reefs reduce wave energy by up to 95%, and without them, waves become unimaginably huge and powerful, destroying countless coastlines and cities. In 2070, the end of our oceans is in sight, but it's not too late to change this fate. Right now, in 2018, coral reefs around the world are struggling, fighting for their lives, but they're still here, and if we do enough to help them, they'll continue thriving for years to come. It's hard to imagine that one person can make a difference, but even starting with simple things like biking, walking, or taking transit instead of driving, packing your lunch in reusable containers, joining your school environment club, and educating yourself on climate issues that you're passionate about can go a long way. Spread the word about the world's dying coral reefs and how unimaginably important they are, and maybe organize a fundraiser or campaign in your community. If we believe that our reefs are worth saving, it's not too late to change their fate. As a wise person once said, "You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough."